of words. What I understand by meditation, to some person meditation means standing on head and thinking of something. To another person it means lying down and thinking. So what we are saying is silent sitting, because children must sit in their classes. Obviously you can't keep them standing throughout. If it is standing, let it be silent standing. One doesn't lose anything. But if they are sitting in the class, what the teacher can do is, before the class starts, before he starts any lecture, just have 1 minute of silence. Just have 60 seconds of silence. We aren't talking of 60 minutes of silence. Nobody can have that. 60 seconds of silence, what will be achieved? If the children are too small, if they're very young children, they may not be able to sit silently. So what the teacher can do is, the teacher can paint a verbal picture in front of them. Think of the fragrance of that rose. Think of the joy that that rose gives. Think of a river. Think of a plant. Think of a bird. Let them think. When we are talking, when we are enabling their imagination to blossom, that picture of a rose, that picture of a plant, that picture of a bird is going to come into their inner eye. And that is what the seed of silent sitting means. The child has tasted the joy of the silent sitting. Then whether you like it or not, he would on his own accord start practicing that silent sitting, because you've enabled, you've fired that dynamite into him, which will give him that power, and it will implode and explode in all directions. In fact, they say silent sitting is the only process which is both endothermic and exothermic. It generates heat, it gives heat, it exits heat, it inputs heat from all directions. Heat means energy. Therefore, it is specially recommended. But no teacher can ask the students to do silent sitting unless he or she practices silent sitting himself. I cannot ask you to do anything. I cannot put my children through a class of silent sitting or through 1 minute of silent sitting, for which I do not need anybody's permission. In fact, if we can achieve 1 minute of silence in the class, the principal, the headmaster, the vice chancellor will start thinking highly of us, because silence is what is absent in the institutions, and silence is what should be found in those institutions. The teacher must practice the silent sitting at his or her own home for 1 minute every day, 2 minutes every day, 2 minutes morning, 2 minutes evening, as many times as you can. In fact, there is a very famous Shinto Japanese saying which says that it's an address to the parents, it's an advice to the parents, that if you cannot bequeath to your children cars, does not matter. If you cannot bequeath to them money, it does not matter. If you cannot leave for them a house, it doesn't matter. But leave with them this habit of silent sitting. If you leave with them this habit of silent sitting, they will find all the wealth, all the treasure of this world in that mass of silence that they would have accumulated. It is the strength. Silence is the strength behind all speech. Silence is the strength behind all speech. And even when he was pestered to give a reply, he said, if you cannot understand my silence, you cannot understand my speech. Silence is more, they say speech is silver and silence is golden. It goes a step beyond. Silence, it doesn't mean that we are dumb, we are like sheep, we are like cattle. Silence means somebody who is aware of his strength. There's a very interesting saying, there's a very interesting story that is accredited to the famous Indian saint Swami Vivekananda. Once there was a pregnant lioness who saw a herd of cattle in a forest, and she pounced upon that herd of cattle. And in the process of pouncing, that little lion cub got delivered, and the lioness died. That herd of sheep, and it started living with those sheep. The sheep gave a lot of love to that small little lion, and that lion also started eating grass like sheep. It started bleating like sheep. It started doing everything like sheep. It lived with sheep. It became a part of sheep. One day, a huge lion came into that forest, and when that lion saw this herd of cattle, this herd of sheep, it started chasing them, and they all ran away. And this lion saw that there is a lion in that herd of sheep which is also running away out of fear for that bigger lion. So he started wondering, why is this lion behaving like a sheep? So he caught hold of that lion, dragged him to a river, and made that small lion look at his reflection in the water, in this clear stream of that river. And what did that lion, baby lion, see? That he looks very much like the bigger lion. And then the bigger lion roared, and Swami Vivekananda says, the smaller lion also roared. The teacher is like a lion. Out of circumstances, out of this vicious situation that is prevalent in our society today, the child has become like a cattle, like a herd of sheep being driven as if mounted on a machine. The teacher enables the child to realize that he is not a sheep. He is not a part of or a herd of the cattle. He is lion. He is the mightiest. In him lies the real force, in him lies the real energy, which can only be scooped out through processes like silent sitting. Therefore, a teacher must practice. In fact, the single most important outcome of this conference should be that if each of us who have not experienced the joy of this silent sitting can take a resolve that, and it doesn't really require time, 1 minute a day, 2 minutes a day, we must practice silent sitting and introduce silent sitting in each class of our schools. The second teaching technique, direct teaching technique, is prayers or quotation or thought. Why do we need this? To which value does that lead? Just as silent sitting leads to the value of truth, the value of peace, prayer or thought or quotation, whichever name, if there are certain countries who have allergy to the use of word prayers. It doesn't matter, it's not the word that's important. The rose will be as fragrant, whatever name you call it by. Prayer or a quotation or a thought. The intention is that we enable the child to concentrate upon something that is ennobling, something that is good, something that can weave an imagination into him. All quotation has been given. That's a prayer. That's also a prayer. Try and try again until the goal is reached. That's a thought, that's a quotation, that's a prayer. There are three things that happen when we use the medium of prayers. Prayers, for instance, many schools have got morning assemblies in many countries. And in that morning assembly, prayer is an essential part of the morning assembly. Please let not that prayer be reduced to a mechanical verbal gymnastic. Prayer has got all the strength, it has got all the power, it's as powerful as silent sitting is. In fact, prayer means we are making a petition to someone who we believe in, who we have faith in, who we believe gives us everything. I am reminded of a very beautiful small story of the famous Mughal emperor of India, whose name was quoted in the morning, Akbar. There was a very poor person who wanted some help from the emperor, who would come to see him. So this poor person also went to the court or to the palace of the emperor and knocked his door. And instead of the emperor, who normally used to come out to ask what does the person need, his deputy or his personal secretary came out. And he told that poor person, "Sir, you would have to wait. Akbar, the king, is saying his prayers in the mosque." So on hearing this poor man started laughing. And hearing his loud laughter, the king came out of the mosque and asked him, "Sir, why is it that you are laughing like a mad person?" Asks Akbar. He says, "I have done a folly, the equivalent of which has not been done by any person in this world." He says, "But what is it that you've done?" He says, "I have come to ask a favor from some person who is himself asking for every favor from someone else." He is praying to God, "May my empire remain intact. May my kingdom remain intact." The Prime Minister continuously prays that next election I must win. That my party, the Conservatives must not defect into Labour Party and Labour must not defect into Conservatives. Everybody is continuously praying. So what do we achieve when we go and beg any person? In fact, the concept of strikes is an insult to the dignity of man. The countries, the democracies of this world are riddled with strikes. If we want that the younger generation, that the generation that is coming up does not take up to this white antish evil of strikes, that power, that resilience has to be built up, that if I must ask anything, if I must need anything, if I must want anything, let me not go and beg anyone who is as imperfect as I am. If I must ask something, I must ask from God only. So that thought, that quotation will improve the memory of the child. You can check with the children after some days whether they remember that quotation or not, whether they remember that thought or not. When the memory increases, the child is led to truth, because that's a component of truth. When the feeling behind that quotation, the feeling behind that prayer increases, the child is led to peace and love. He feels that love and kinship with the prayer, with the thought, with that quotation. It also leads to righteous conduct, because every prayer has a message. And that message is that we must be righteous in our actions. It also leads to non-violence, because we never pray for violence. We always pray for peace. We always pray for happiness. We never pray that I alone should have peace. God give peace to me, my wife, my son, his wife, us four, and no more. That's the prayer of no person. The prayer of every person is that let the whole world be happy, let the whole world be joyous and peaceful. And that is also achieved through this process of quotation or prayer. The third thing is, which is very important, group singing. I may be allowed to disrupt this transparency for a while and draw your attention to something, a bit of medical science now. It says the dynamic equilibrium of human personality implies the following at a physiological plane. If we want equilibrium in our life, what does that mean medically speaking? Medically speaking, it means each of us has a breath. We all breathe. And whenever we feel good in our life, whenever we feel nice in our life, if you observe yourself, you will find that there is a rhythm in the breath. The breath reads, the breath goes on, the process of breathing goes on in a very beautiful rhythm. It can never be that you are feeling nice and your breath is going haphazard, haywire, being derailed. Whenever you feel nice, whenever you feel good, the breathing will be in a particular rhythm. Whenever we are in a state of peace, goodness, and happiness, the heartbeat will be stable. The beating of the heart will again be rhythmic. It will be very, very stable. It can never be that we are feeling good and the heartbeat has gone out. In fact, erratic heartbeat is always interpreted as absence of peace, restlessness in a human being. So much so that when we speak the untruth or tell a lie, no one will know that I have told a lie. If you ask me something and I don't tell you the truth, I tell you the untruth, you would never know that I have told you the untruth. But the moment I utter that lie, my heartbeat will go out of stability, out of rhythm for a moment. My heart will start pounding a little faster that you haven't done the right thing. Whenever I do any mistake, the first thing that will happen in my medical physical system is that my heartbeat will become erratic. So whenever we have an erratic heartbeat, let us be sure there is something wrong that we are doing. There is something. We don't have to go and ask someone whether I'm doing the right thing or not. The heartbeat will tell us whether we're doing the right thing or not. And the third thing is the pulse. The pulse that is within all of us, which is a combination of the process of breathing and the process of circulation in our blood. And that pulse must be normal. The pulse must be steady. State of mind, absence of peace, absence of calm, absence of quietude. Thus, human equilibrium in essence means a rhythmic breath, a stable heartbeat, or instead of normal, I think steady pulse would be a better word, steady pulse. Whatever action we do, we must not forget that these three things must be achieved. Whatever we do, if our breath can remain rhythmic, if our heartbeat can remain stable, if our pulse can remain steady, that is a test of righteous conduct. Thus, all these 5 teaching techniques which are being recommended have a direct impact on each of these 3. When we are silent, the breath is rhythmic, the heartbeat is stable, the pulse is normal. When we utter a good word, when we utter a prayer, when we utter a thought, when we utter a quotation, the breath is rhythmic, the heartbeat is stable, and the pulse is steady. And it is here that the importance of the third teaching technique comes in. Which is group singing. The children must be taught to sing as much as they can in all the ways they can. Singing means music. There is life in music because the very fact that our heart beats, it has a sound, it has a murmur of its own, is musical. Whatever the child imbibes through the medium of music lives in the memory long after. Again, let's remember that